the Ensemble designs BrightEye NXT 450 clean streaming router. Despite its compact size, it contains both a full-featured encoder and a decoder. Let's look at the architecture. At the center of the NXT 450 is an SDI crosspoint matrix. It connects all of the resources, inputs, outputs, clean switches, test signal generators, and an encoder and decoder. Let's start by looking at the encoder. This is an MPEG-4 H.264 encoder. It has a baseband HD or SD SDI input that's fed to it from the matrix. So any of the sources that are connected to the NXT 450 can be delivered to the encoder, and if they're delivered through one of the clean switches, you have clean switching and mixing between sources. The encoder produces both a high and low resolution output simultaneously, the high resolution for broadcast purposes, the low resolution for mobile and handheld devices. The IP output can deliver 2 unicast and 1 multicast streams simultaneously. Each one is independently configurable, and each can choose whether it's delivering the high or low resolution signal. Those 2 signals are also selectable into a DVB ASI formatter, and that signal is returned in DVB ASI form back into the matrix. It can be delivered to a BNC output or to fiber for delivery to some distant location. The decoder is completely independent of the encoder, and that means there are lots of ways that they can be used both independently and together. The decoder can receive over an IP connection a unicast or a multicast signal, and through the matrix it can receive a DVB ASI signal. The control interface for the decoder allows the user to select which of those 3 sources are going to be decoded and delivered in baseband form as HD or SD SDI back into the matrix. The configuration of the encoding, streaming, and decoding resources can be completely managed from the front panel of the NXT 450 or through the web interface. Let's take a look at that. Configuration of the encoder is in the Encoding tab. Let's start by looking at the controls for the high-resolution encoder. We can select baseline, main, or high profile, and we can choose the encoding level. That all-important question of what's the bit rate is accomplished from this simple control here. 8,000 kilobits per second, well, that's 8 megabits. I can simply type in a new value and set it to 4 megabits, for example. Audio encoding, we have a choice of MPEG-2, also referred to as MP3, or AAC encoding, and we can select the bit rate that is applied to the audio. The assignment of PIDs, packet IDs, can be manual or automatic. Now, the low-resolution encoder has all the same set of controls, but generally is going to be run at a much lower bit rate. With the encoder set up, now we can look at the configuration of the streaming outputs. We go to the Streaming tab. Remember from the block diagram that there are 2 unicast outputs. Here is unicast stream A. I can turn it on and off, and I can select whether it's driven by the low or high resolution output of the encoder. I set the IP address that I want this stream to be delivered to and the destination port. Time to live, packet size, and the source port are also configurable. The unicast B output is completely independent of the A output. Now, how might you use that? Well, you might be delivering the same high-resolution feed to 2 separate locations, or perhaps you want to deliver both the high and low-resolution feed to one location. It's easy to configure that in the control system. And then finally, we have a multicast output. We can enable that, and again choose the resolution, and set the destination IP address and the destination port. You'll notice here that the multicast output starts at 239, which is a pretty traditional IP address for multicast. So there we have the full configuration of the encoder and the streaming outputs. Very straightforward and simple to do. And think of these as independent resources, that the unicast outputs are independent from one another in how they're being used. Now, the decoder, again, if we recall from the block diagram, that the decoder can select either a unicast, a multicast, or a DVB ASI input. In the case of unicast, we only need to configure the port that we're going to receive the signal on. It will be on our own IP address. And if we select multicast, then we're presented with positions for both the IP address and the source port. A very useful feature of the decoder is the ability to set the output format. So I could select, say, 720p 5994 as my output format, and regardless of the incoming format in the stream, IP or DVB ASI, the decoder will convert to the format that I've requested. So there you have it. A high-performance encoder with both high and low resolution outputs, complete configuration over streaming, and a decoder that will deliver the format you want, configurable from the front panel or through the web. The BrightEye NXT 450 Clean Streaming Router.